So I think we're one of the smaller brands that are presenting today. So is everybody familiar with Clif Bar? The Climber Unpack, the Energy Bar. We also make Clif Kid Z-Bar and Luna Bars, if you don't know. So I'm very excited to be talking to you today about how we're helping to reshape consumer insights at Clif Bar. As consumer professionals, aren't we all looking to increase the impact our research has on the organization? I know I am, and sometimes I feel like we really succeed in having the impact I want, and sometimes not so much. So I've spent time reflecting on when things have gone well, and I'm going to share those with you today, and hopefully there are some nuggets that you can take with you back to your organization. So flashback to 3 years ago when I joined Clif Bar. Insights, surprisingly, was very new to the company. I was the first department head they had. We had and still have limited resources in terms of people and budget, and we were operating a lot like data providers. So we were fulfilling requests, handing over data, usually for very tactical projects. We weren't being invited to key meetings. We weren't involved in strategy discussions. The brand team wasn't really sure when or how to really leverage us, and we had very little exposure outside of brand. So I knew I wanted to transition us from a team that provided data to a team that provided insights to help drive strategy. And to do that, I'd have to increase the impact our research had on the organization. So I think these are 5 things that helped us do that at Clif Bar. So we identified 1 or 2 key projects that we could leverage. Within those projects, what are the right topics? We started with the implications when building the story, and then we really made sure to fine-tune the message and paid a lot of attention in how we socialized it and rolled it out. So identifying 1 or 2 key projects was really important for us. I knew senior management isn't going to give me a lot of money to fund additional research if they don't understand the value that insights can bring. So I'd have to look within my existing portfolio of projects. So I recommend kind of asking yourself 4 questions. Where is there opportunity to have the biggest strategic impact? Where can we help advance organizational understanding the most? Where can we reach the most important stakeholders? And where can we reach the broadest audience? For us, this was annual business planning and our annual brand tracker. Today, I'm going to focus on business planning because business planning was really a great opportunity to highlight our thought leadership, have a big impact on strategy, and reach key influential audiences. And it didn't require additional resources because we could leverage and repackage existing data. So this is a fairly typical annual business planning process, even if maybe the words are a little different at your organizations. And this is how we're operating at Clif. So we would start with insights, doing a series of detailed presentations. Nielsen or IRI data, our brand tracker, maybe some trend presentations. And this was followed by an excruciatingly detailed regurgitation of those studies. So deep dive after deep dive after deep dive, kind of any question that the ABMs or brand managers could come up with. And then the brand teams would go off and do their state of the business or key learnings, where they're assessing the factors impacting their business over the next 1 to 3 years. So fairly typical, but we noticed a few problems with this approach. By trying to summarize all of our research, we weren't creating focus, and we weren't creating a dialogue around the most critical business issues. Second, the brand teams were left to interpret the strategic implications on their own, and this resulted in them presenting to leadership very different views of the consumer and the competitive landscape. And then lastly, all the really fun strategic analysis was being done by the brand team, not the insights team, and usually in a somewhat self-serving way. So as the head of insights, I took issue with this and decided to create an extra step for insights. So our own key learnings. And this is really insights' opportunity to set the stage for what trends, threats, opportunities, we should be talking about as an organization and making sure we're level setting everybody, leadership team, sales, each brand team. What are the common factors impacting all of our brands and business before the teams go off and do their individual assessment? So once we were going to do consumer insights, key learnings, it was important to pick the right topics. So this is really insights opportunity to make some judgment calls around what we should be talking about as an organization. What do we need to know to really drive our strategies and our plans? So these were some filters that I used. Where can we build on current strategies? Adventure is a huge part of Clif's brand persona. We know a lot about adventure. But there is also an opportunity for us to help the organization better understand and connect to what adventure meant to our consumer. Where can we address misinformation or internal confusion? This was helping the team understand that consumers viewed a competitor as they used a competitor for satiety rather than muscle performance, which is typically the case with a high protein bar. Where can we look further upstream? So, what don't we know but should? We really wanted to use this opportunity to shine the spotlight on Gen Z and digital, and we leveraged a lot of the really great free syndicated data to help us do this. Where can we raise provocative questions or question those sacred cows? This was helping the organization understand the importance of both organic and non-GMO labeling on our package. And I'll cover off on that a little bit later. This was a very sacred cow for us when I came in. And then how can we help the teams think about problems differently? And this doesn't even have to involve data. Often I'll just create simple constructs or frameworks to help them problem solve differently. So we'd been working on flavor innovation and really been struggling in a certain area. And I illustrated that we'd been kind of thinking about the opportunity at two extreme ends of the spectrum, when there is a whole range in the middle that was probably more palatable to consumers and more likely to be a natural kind of adoption cycle that we hadn't been thinking about. So after the first year of doing key learnings, I heard from several people that it was the last two-page summary that they kept returning to. So now I start with that summary. What are the so whats? What do I want them to walk out of the room knowing and taking action on as they move into strategies and plans? Then I think about the data that best supports that and build the story. And this sounds simple, but I swear this has saved me so much time, and it's been one of the most impactful things that we've done. Doing so will help you focus on big picture strategy versus getting bogged down in the minutia. It really made distilling a year's worth of data much simpler, saving me valuable time. So instead of creating slide after slide after slide to eventually get to the right story, and half those slides kind of get thrown away, it's start with the story and then what's the one slide that supports it. And it's brought greater value to our internal stakeholders. This kind of maybe walks that fine line of researchers being unbiased. But I really believe the organization needs us to be ruthless editors. They don't have time to sift through 200 pages of reports. I don't have time to sift through 200 pages of reports. And so it's Insight's role to really help the organization see the forest through the trees. And they really do rely on us to deliver a quick guide for what they should be doing and thinking about. But when we deliver that quick guide, it's also extremely important to make sure that we get the message right. So as you're crafting your story, building your implications, slow down. Slow down and really think about the message, fine-tune it, nuance your language. There's a lot of power in words. And this has come to life for me in two ways. One, really being cognizant of how your words play out on paper when you're not in the room. I've been so surprised at how a bullet point, which is so clear in my head, is taken so many different directions when I'm not in the room. And I shop around my my implications and takeaways, especially the more controversial ones, to get input before I roll them out more broadly. This really helps you kind of understand where there's potential confusion and where there's hesitation. And when there is hesitation, kind of really dig into and use your consumer behavior skills and understand like what's causing that hesitation. And this came to life for me with non-GMO and organic. So when I joined Clif, I knew that both non-GMO and organic were extremely important to consumers. But every time I brought it up, I met resistance. And not just like a little bit of resistance, but people like actively backing away from me and not wanting to go anywhere near that subject. Because our owner felt very strongly about non-GMO. And when you're a privately held company, you know, the owner carries a lot of weight. But it wasn't really until I started digging into and understanding why there is hesitation that I understood how to best articulate the consumer need. So it wasn't that we didn't think that non-GMO was important, we did. But Gary felt really strongly about supporting organic, and he worried that non-GMO labeling would confuse the meaning of organic, because organic restricts the use of GMOs. Once I knew that, I was able to re-articulate the need to show that 90% of consumers don't know that organic labeling restricts the use of GMOs. So then we were able to finally start making progress towards getting both organic and non-GMO messaging on pack. I don't know, did you guys know that organic restricts non-GMOs? Right, nice. So then once we had this really great piece of research, we wanted to make sure we paid a lot of attention to how we were rolling it out and socializing it. This can really help build our influence too. This is what we do for key learnings at Clif Bar. You know, it's certainly going to depend project by project and what your organizational culture is like, but this has worked really well for us with business planning. So we start with the brand team who sees the most detailed presentation, usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's a meaty amount of subject, but it's still digestible. Then we quickly follow with the leadership team who sees a slightly distilled version, so maybe an hour, hour and a half if I can get that with them. We experimented with doing leadership team first and brand second, but I feel for a company like Clif Bar, that bottom-up approach rather than top-down really works best for us. And it's super helpful for me to kind of use the brand team to fine-tune that message before we get to leadership. The last three may be less typical for some of you. So the next thing we do is we take it to our cross-functional department heads. And we do this in combination with brand. So we spend about 30 minutes recapping consumer insights with a summary of each brand's state of the business or key learnings. And this has been really impactful to help cross-functional leaders that we may have less exposure to really see and understand how the consumer is so connected to our plans and our strategies. Then we take it to the sales team, usually at the sales meeting. And lastly, we do a company-wide share out. So for anyone who's interested in learning more about our consumers, we spend about a half hour kind of recapping the highlights of key learnings. So while it may seem efficient or inefficient to have all of these meetings, it really has created efficiencies for us in driving common understanding, making sure we're all on the same page and we're kind of focused and moving in the right direction. So what has been the impact on us at Clif Bar? You know, we see an increased demand for research across levels and departments, so leadership team, brand, sales, R&D. We see an increase in demand for our opinion, not just data. So like an increase in those internal consulting hours. We're being invited to key meetings now. We're involved in strategy discussions. But to me, you know, the greatest kind of testament to the impact we're having is there's just greater organizational excitement to learn more about the consumer. So teams have included us as part of standard onboarding for new employees, and we've talked about making that a required track for all people. Teams have included us in their weekly meetings just to kind of learn more about the consumer and who we are as a department and what we do. Some teams have asked for quarterly share-outs on new and relevant topics. So R&D, a team that we hadn't really worked with in the past, but there's certainly a lot of information that we can be feeding them to kind of spark creativity and ideas. You know, it's awesome. I love working at Clif Bar, and I love seeing insights really being viewed as a valuable resource, and us being able to help shape the strategy on a brand that I love. But in all transparency, we're not done yet. We're not exactly where I want us to be. And so this is my last bit of advice. So beyond the tips and the tools, it really also requires 2 personality traits from the insights leaders: perseverance and persistence, or persuasiveness and perseverance. You know, we need these 2 to kind of push through obstacles to succeed. I've learned you can't make the organization move faster than the organization wants to move. So I've had to consistently nudge it in the right direction, articulating and re-articulating messages, as painful as that may be, persistently showing the value that insights can bring, taking no in stride, and playing the long game. So that's what we've done at Clif Bar. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm also, like I said, we're not there yet either. So I'm super interested to hear from you guys, things that you've done to increase your influence and the impact that the research has had at your organization.